Hello. On my last video, Chucky Fox left a comment saying, "Where are your portable amp reviews? I need them. You are the best amp reviewer by a long shot. How am I supposed to know what to buy?" Smiley face. Well, thank you for the comment. And to answer your question, I've just been lazy, so I'm sorry that I've been lazy. But to end my laziness, today I decided to make some tier lists on portable amplifiers and DACs. So hopefully this video that you're about to watch right now will be helpful so you can see like what amps and DACs you think you might want to consider buying. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to start off with the first tier list, and that's going to be on battery power. So this is to see how long the battery can last. So this is going to be the first list that I have for you. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm just going to full screen this, and then I'm going to resize this to a 10 or 11. So let's go ahead and get started. Now this is a computer and this is a laptop. These are going to be used in the other lists, but for this list these are going to be not mentioned at all. They're just there. So F tier, just pretend that that does not exist. So we're going to start in E tier. Now the Audioquest Dragonfly Black is a portable USB stick, but it does not come with a built-in battery. So it has 0 hours of battery life. So that's why that's an E tier. And then we also have another USB dongle type of amp DAC, and this is the Theo K1. And this also does not have a built-in battery. So that's also going to be E tier. So now we actually get into the portable amplifiers. So we're going to start with D tier, and we're going to start from the back side. So we have the Little Bear B4. This has about 4 to 4.5 hours of battery life and about 2 to 2.5 hours of charge time. The topping NX2S has about 5 hours of battery life and about 4 hours of charge time. Now this is a special case, is if you use the line in on the topping NX2S, then the battery life is actually 40 hours, which makes it tied for first place. But we're going to get to that later. So moving up to C tier, we have the Thx AAA Portable from Monoprice. And this is in C tier because this has 6 hours of battery life with about 6 hours of charge time. Some people claim that theirs does 10 hours. Mine only does 6 hours, so that's why it's in C tier. And then we have the Ifi. So we're going to move on to the B tier. So now we have the Ifi XDSD. This has about 6.5 to 7.5 battery life on USB. Bluetooth was like 9 hours and 20 minutes or something like that. The NX4 is about 7.5 hours and 4 hours of charge time. The Ifi Nano is somewhere between 6 to 8. I did sell this, by the way. This is one of the devices I actually don't own anymore, but I think I remember it was about 8 hours of battery life with 4 hours of charge time. And then we have the Chord Mojo, and this has about 8 hours of battery life with 4 hours of charge time. So that's done with the B tier. So moving on to A tier, we then have the Fio, or Fiio, I don't really care how you say that, the Theo Q1 Mark II, and the battery life on this is 10 hours. Oh, actually I did want to mention something. The battery life on this is 10 hours, but if you use the line in, then the battery life on this is actually 20 hours. which actually puts that in front of the Ifi xcan. So right now that's third place, so this would actually go in front of that. And back to the NX4 in B tier, I just wanted to mention, if you use the line in on this, then you get 28 hours of battery life. So this would actually be third place. So that would go right after the NX5. So I would go right in here. So this would be third place. This would actually be fifth place. And if you use the line in on this, this would actually be fourth place, because the line in on this is 25 hours with 4 hours of charge time. Now if you use USB on the Theo Q5, which this is the older Q5 I want to mention, then the battery life is only 10 hours. But if you use line in, then it's 25. And then we have the Theo M11 Pro digital audio player. And the battery life on this is 9.5 to 10 hours. But the only reason why I put this above these two Theos is because the charge time is only 2 hours. And then we have the Theo A1. The battery life on this is 13 hours and charge time is somewhere between 1 to 2 hours. And then we have the Theo A5, and the battery life on that was 13 hours and charge time's around 4 hours. So that's done with the A tier. So moving on to the S tier, you'll notice that all the amplifiers in S tier are amps only. None of them are amp DACs, besides the Ifi xcan, which does use a DAC for the Bluetooth. Which the Bluetooth, by the way, it claims 12 hours. I only get like 9.5. But the Fio A3 is about 16 hours with about 4 hours of charge time. And then the Ifi xcan is about 18 hours with about 4 hours of charge time. And then we have the topping NX5, which is about 30 hours of battery life with about 4 hours of charge time. And then we have finally the last one, which is the topping NX1, and that has a battery life of about 40 hours with also like 4 hours of charge time. So that's basically battery. Now do mind, we do have some here that can be lined in, like this one here. If you line this in, then it is 40 hours, so it's actually tied for first. And then this would be third place, this would be fourth, and this would be fifth, and then this would be sixth, and this would be seventh. So let's go ahead and move on. To power. So now we're going to do power. So this is how much headroom you have. And I also actually want to get out of full screen so I can show you something. So I used the HiFiMan HE6 Special Edition V1 to test these amplifiers that I currently own. So I was not able to test anything I don't currently have anymore. But I was able to test things I currently own. And this is what I came up with. So you can read all this and pause the video. But that's all I'm going to show of this because I have everything memorized. So we're going to go back to this slide now. And do power. So a laptop or a phone probably is not going to have enough power to power the HE6s. So you're probably going to max out the volume and it's going to be too quiet. Then we move up to E tier. So the Theo A1 is going to be in E tier. And then we have the Theo K1 Audioquest Dragonfly Black, and then a computer. And then we have now this is actually one of the devices I do own, but I could not find the power adapter for that to charge it, so I didn't actually test it. So I just threw it at the bottom of C tier. But then we have the NX1S, the topping NX2S, the Q1 Mark II, the Theo M11, the Theo Q5, the Theo A3, and the Ifi Nano, all in C tier. Moving up to B tier, we have the Theo A5, the topping NX4, the topping NX5, the Thx Portable, and the Ifi xcan, or xdsd, and then we have the Ifi xcan, and then the Chord Mojo. And as you can see, I put none of these devices in S tier, because if I had something like the Ifi Micro, that's probably what belongs in S tier in my opinion, and it's probably the only amp DAC that can actually drive, not power, but drive the HiFiMan HE6. I would say none of these amplifiers can actually drive the HE6. They can make it loud, but they don't drive the headphone. So nothing gets put in the S tier. So before we move on, I actually want to go back to that text document, which I do not have open. Okay. So, if we go back to our text document, you can see that the computer got 80 volume, Windows volume before it got loud, or 100 is too loud. So if we go back to this, you can see that's where I put the computer. And then the Audioquest is a little worse. And then as you can see, the Theo K1 is about 90s Windows volume, so you can see that's a little bit worse. That's why those are in D tier in terms of power. And then we move on. Now, since I don't have the NX1S anymore, I was not able to test it. But looking at the specifications, it has about the same specs as the Topping NX2. So if you take a look at the Topping NX2, you can see single-ended, single gain, meaning there's only one gain option. So there's no low gain or high gain, it's just one option of gain. You can see that 7 volume is loud, 8 is too loud, and then 10 to 9 is, hearing damage type of loud. So if we compare the Topping to the Theo Q1 Mark II, you can see that the Theo Q1 Mark II is actually weaker single-ended wise. And then balanced low gain is about the same as single-ended high gain. But if you use the Theo Q1 Mark II in balanced and you put on high gain, then you do actually get a little more usable volume on the HiFiMan HE6. So that's why I put the Theo Q1 Mark II above the Topping, because the balance gives it a slight edge, but overall they're mostly still all C tier. And if we take a look at the Theo Q5, all of these are the same. It only pulls ahead by a little bit once you go balanced high gain. And then we see the Theo M11 Pro, and it's actually pretty weak here, but it's pretty decent here. And because it still has slightly better, well actually I did put the Q5 above it. So the Theo M11 Pro goes here, and I put the Q5 slightly above it, because I think balanced, it probably has just a tiny bit more power than this. And then I put the Fiio A3 above these three, because the single-ended on the A3 is stronger than these three Fios. And the single-ended performance, even though I don't have this device anymore to test, the single-ended performance should be about as strong as these three devices when running balanced on high gain. So that's why I put the Fiio A3 here. And then the Ifi Nano, I do not have any more to test, but I would assume it's pretty much similar to a Fiio A3. So once we move to B tier, the Fio A5 is definitely the strongest in terms of the Fios for single-ended performance. And then we move into the toppings, which you can see looking at my numbers that the toppings do a ton better. You can see that 2 o'clock is actually loud. So you got a lot more usable volume knob there. So that's why they're in B tier. But the reason why they're only in B tier is I did another test, which is the Windows volume test. Where you actually lower the Windows volume and then you max out the toppings volume. So with the topping volume maxed and the Windows volume lowered, you can see that 60 Windows volume is loud. And then on high gain, 30 Windows volume is loud. When we compare that to the Thx Portable, at plus 16, 20 Windows volume is loud. And then when we go to the Ifi, you can see that 20 is loud, or if you go balanced, then 15 is loud. And then when we go to the Chord Mojo, you can see that 10 Windows volume, which is double light pink by the way, is loud. And then it's actually, I believe that's supposed to be like that actually. So actually 15 is loud, and then 10 is too loud. So this is almost about equal with the balance of this, pretty much. And that's basically power. So let's go ahead and move on to the next tier list. So now we're going to do accessories. So we're going to ignore the computer and the laptop, so just pretend that the F tier does not exist. So we're going to start at E tier. So we have the Audioquest Dragonfly Black. And this is an E tier because the only accessory that it comes with is like a leather pouch, so you can put it in. Otherwise, that's all you get. But then again, that is all you need because it's literally just plug and play, meaning you just stick the USB stick into your laptop and you're ready to go. So it doesn't really need any accessories. But otherwise, I put it in E tier. And then we have the Chord Mojo in D tier. The only accessory this comes with is like a 3-inch, 6-inch USB cable. It's a micro USB to USB A, and that's just for charging the device. And that's the only accessory it gives you, other than box and manual. All these devices come with a box and a manual, pretty much. And then we have the Theo K1. I put this above the Audioquest because they give you like a 3-foot micro USB cable to use with your computer for, playing audio, which makes it a little more convenient. Or you can also use that same cable to charge it. So this is why that's in D tier. So moving up to C tier, we have the Theo M11 Pro. They give you a small charging cable as well. Actually, no. They give you like a 3-foot Type-C cable. And then they also give you like a little 3.5 millimeter adapter and like a little tool so you can remove the micro USB slot. And that's about it. Thx Portable. They also give you like a 3-foot cable. It's a micro USB cable. And then they also give you a bag to carry the portable amplifier in. And then the reason why this gets into C tier above the Fiio is because it also gives you a power adapter as well. So you can plug that USB cable into that, and then you can plug the power adapter into a power strip to charge your device. So you can basically plug this in anywhere in your house to charge the device. But overall, the Thx Portable is still C tier. Then we have B tier. So we have the Fio A1. It also comes with like a 3-foot micro USB cable. It has like 2 or 3 extra plastic clips. But the reason why which by the way, these are all amplifiers. The reason why all of these amplifiers are in B tier is because they actually give you a cable to hook up to your phone. These two devices in C tier, they don't give you a cable to hook up to your phone. These do. These ones in B tier do, but they are amplifiers only, which means the Theo A1, they give you a 3.5 to 3.5 millimeter cable. It's like 3 to 6 inches long. Moving on to the Fio A3, it's basically the same thing as the Fio A1, just minus the little plastic clips, and they give you like rubber bands and a silicone pad. And then the Little Bear B4, they also give you a 3.5 to 3.5. It also comes with a power brick, not an adapter, a power brick, and that's in order to charge the device. So they give you a power brick. And then they also give you, I think that's all they give you. It might also come with a USB cable. I can't remember. And then we have the Fio A5. That also gives you a 3.5 to 3.5 cable. They also give you a charging cable and another, I believe another USB cable, like a 3-foot cable. And then they also give you rubber bands, and they also give you silicone pads, and they actually give you an extra two, like 1 or 2 extra silicone pads. So that's why that's in B tier. So moving on to A tier, this is where the accessories actually start to get good. The included accessories. So the topping NX1S is the same thing as the topping NX5. Now these are both just amps as well. And since these are just amps, the reason why I put these two above these four, because these four are also amps, is because the accessories with these two amps are slightly better. So that's why they're in A tier. So these two are basically the same, so they come with a 3.5 to 3.5 millimeter. They give you rubber bands, they give you a silicone pad, and one major upgrade is they give you Velcro. What else? I actually forgot what else, but the major upgrade is that they give you Velcro. And then we have the Ifi Nano, which is basically the same thing as the Ifi xcan and the X Dsd. Ooh, I gotta breathe. So let's start with the X Dsd first. So the X Dsd does give you a bag, a carry pouch bag. You do get a mini optical adapter. You do get like a 3-foot USB cable to use with your computer. You also get a Type-C charging cable. You also get a 3.5 to 3.5 cable, I believe. Actually, maybe might not. You also get Velcro to attach it to your phone. And they also include 2 USB adapters. But the reason why this is an A tier, not S tier, is because it does not include a cable to hook up to your phone. But if you go on Amazon, there is a $10 option to buy a Android OTG cable. So if you need like micro to Type-C, or if you need micro or like USB, or it's actually USB to Type-C or USB to micro or USB to Lightning, it's about $10 more. If you get that included $10 cable, then this would be S tier. Otherwise, it's A tier. The Ifi xcan is basically the same thing, but they do include a 3.5 to 3.5 millimeter cable, and that is what you can hook up to your phone because this is only an amplifier. But all the other accessories are the same. The Ifi Nano is basically the same thing as the Ifi xdsd minus the Velcro and minus the mini optical adapter that comes with the xdsd. So that's basically it for A tier. So when we move on to S tier, we have the Theo Q1 Mark II, we have the topping NX2S, the topping NX4, and the Theo Q5. So let's start with the Q5 first. So you get a carry pouch bag, you also get a mini optical adapter, you also get a 3.5 to 3.5 millimeter cable, you also get micro to Type-C cable, you get a micro to micro cable, you get a micro to Lightning cable, which by the way, if you got the new Q5, they have a Type-C version, but this is the older Q5, so it uses micro. So you get 3 different types of micro cables. You also get a longer micro USB to standard USB-A cable, so that one you can hook up to your computer. And then You also get silicone pads, and you also get rubber bands. The only thing that the Theo Q5 is missing is Velcro. Now if we move to the NX4, it's basically the same thing as the NX5 and NX2S. So meaning you get rubber bands, silicone pad, Velcro, 3.5 to 3.5 millimeter cable, but since this has a built-in DAC, you also get 3 micro USB cables. So you get a micro USB to micro USB, you get micro USB to Type-C, and you also get micro USB to Lightning. And then the topping NX2S is the exact same as the NX4. You can get the exact same accessories. And then the Theo Q1 Mark II is the exact same accessories as the NX4, minus the Velcro, but plus a carry pouch bag, which is the exact same bag that also comes with the Theo Q5. And that's basically accessories. So let's go ahead and move on to the next tier list. So we're going to go ahead and do build quality now. So again, we're going to ignore the F tier. So ignore the computer and ignore the laptop. So we're going to start in E tier. So the Fio A1, I don't remember if that thing was made out of metal. I think it may have been plastic, and it uses micro USB, and it uses these plastic clips. Even though they do include 2 extra plastic clips, they're very cheap, so they can break. So I'm putting this in E tier. Then we move up to D tier. Now the Audioquest Dragonfly Black has a pretty good metal build, but it has one major flaw. Is since that it's a USB stick, meaning the USB pops out right here, when you plug that into your laptop or computer, it can be easily bent and broken off, especially every time you're plugging in a headphone. So that's why it's in D tier. The reason why I put the Theo K1 above it is because it doesn't use a USB stick. Instead, you use a USB cable to hook it up to your computer, which means there's no way that, so if you're going to either break the cable or break the port that's inside of the K1, which is more or less unlikely. And this has a decent metal build. I would say the Audioquest is better in terms of the actual metal, but otherwise these are in D tier. Then we have C tier. Now the major advantage of the Ifi XDSD and the Ifi xcan is that they use Type-C. That is pretty good because the only other devices here that use Type-C is the newer Theo Q5S, which I don't have, and the Theo M11 Pro. Nothing else uses Type-C. So the big advantage to these is that they have Type-C. But then they have, and another big advantage is they use a metal button to change the bass boost or the 3D function. But other than that, the reason why these are in C tier is I really dislike the metal build. The first problem with it is it's a fingerprint magnet, so it gets really tarnished, like so tarnished it looks like it's about to rust. That's like how bad it looks. And then the second issue is that the metal build is kind of soft. It's like a softer metal. So if you do drop it on the floor, it's more likely to get dented. And then this back portion here is made out of plastic, and the reason why they do that is for the Bluetooth. So moving on to B tier, we have the Theo Q1 Mark II, Fio A3, the Little Bear B4, topping NX1S, topping NX2S, topping NX4, topping NX5. Let's go ahead and do the toppings. Metal build is mostly the same on all of them, and they're all very good metal builds. I personally like the feel of the square metal build better on the 5 and the 2. The volume knobs on the 5 and the 4 is the same and very good. They both use micro USB, both headphone ports are the same, but the reason why they get knocked down to a B tier is because they use plastic switches for the high and low gain and the bass boost. And we also have the NX2, which has a nice scroll wheel type of thing. It's a little bit weird, and that's the only thing that's kind of putting it back in terms of build quality. Because I was thinking about putting the NX2 in A, because it doesn't actually have any switches for bass boost or high gain, because it doesn't use high gain or bass boost. But this scroll wheel kind of sets it back, so that's why I put it in B tier. And then the NX1 is pretty much self-explanatory. Let's go to the Fios. So Fios, again, you get these plastic switches. The NX1 also gives you plastic switches for high-low gain bass boost. So these give you plastic switches. These all use micro USB besides this. This also uses micro USB, but this has one advantage out of all of these here, is it actually uses metal, or like little sliders. It uses metal sliders for the bass boost and the high and low gain. And the volume knob is okay, but it also uses micro USB. So it's still a B tier in my opinion. And the reason why I put it behind these is I actually don't really like the metal build on the Q1. I think the A3 is a little bit better metal build, and then the toppings are a little bit better of a metal build. So that's why I put this down here. And fun fact, I've actually bent my Theo Q1 Mark II's USB port. So it still works, but I did bend it by accident because it fell off the desk while it was plugged in. So basically the micro USB port is going to be your most notable issue when it comes to build quality. So let's go ahead and move on to A tier. So we have the Fio A5. It's basically the same volume knob. It's actually more of the same volume knob as the Q5. It's a little more similar to that. I do believe one of the switches is plastic though. Still has micro USB, but overall the Theo A5 has a better metal build than these two Fios, and it's more close to on par with the Q5. And then we have the Ifi Nano, which is probably my top 3 favorite in terms of volume knobs. My first favorite would probably be the Portable, the Thx Portable. Second favorite would probably be the Nano, and third favorite would probably be the Theo M11 Pro in terms of volume knob. Though if I had to pick a fourth favorite, the Mojo, but those are like buttons, so those don't really count. But back to the Nano, I really like the smooth volume knob. The build is way better on this than these two Ifis. Like, I just do not like the metal chassis on the XDSD and the xcan. It's just terrible. They should have went with this. The good news is the new Ifi Micro Signature uses a metal build kind of similar to the Nano, so that's the good news. It does have a little plastic switch on the back for the filter, but otherwise it uses a full-size USB on the back though, and that gives it a distinct advantage to anything in B tier, because that's less likely to break. Then we have the Chord Mojo. It also has a very good metal build. Really, the only thing that might feel a little cheap are these little balls here. They're kind of plasticky. Other than that, though, the build quality is very good. And this gets put to A tier because it also has one major advantage, is that you get 2 headphone ports. So if one of these headphone ports were to break, you still have a second one as a backup. And that's also another reason why I put the toppings above the Theo Q1 Mark II, because these toppings all come with 2 USB ports, one for charging and then one for audio. So that's a little bit better in terms of build quality in my opinion. But speaking of that, the Theo Q5 is the only one here where you can actually swap the micro USB port. So the Theo Q5, which is this one right here, comes with 2 USB ports. One for charging and one for audio. If one of those ports were to break, you can still go into the Fiio app and change the USB port to either charging or audio. So I should still be able to use one of the USB ports, and that's a major, and I'm talking about major improvement in terms of build quality. Being able to swap the USB ports is very, very good. Because if one of these break, I can just go into the Fiio app, change it to charging when I want to charge it, and when it's done charging, change it back to audio, and there we go. Now another reason why the Theo Q5 is at the top is it uses metal buttons for play, pause, next track, last track, but it also uses over here on the back side here, it uses metal switches or sliders to change the bass boost or the high-low gain. All these ones in B tier, other than the Q1 Mark II, all use plastic switches. So that's why the Theo Q5 is in A tier. Also, the metal build is very good as well. The only thing that's not so great about it is it uses micro USB, but you do get two of them that can be swappable. And the newer Theo Q5 now has Type-C. But the only other thing that doesn't make it get to S tier is the volume knob it's not the greatest. Because I just said I like the Nano's volume knob better, the Thx or the Theo M11 Pro. And then we go to the Thx Portable. Build quality is about as good in terms of the metal shell as the Q5. Also uses metal buttons or plastic buttons. They do wiggle a little bit, while these buttons don't wiggle. And the volume knob is very good and has a nice screen. There's not much else to say. Speaking of screens, we have the Theo M11 Pro. Also has a nice screen. In fact, the screen on that is obviously a lot better because it can actually play video. A very nice volume knob and very nice build. It's basically the same thing as the Q5, but it uses Type-C instead of USB micro. So that's basically build quality. So let's go ahead and move on to the next tier list. So now we're going to do bass boost, and this one was pretty much the easiest one. So you can see that I removed a lot of devices because a lot of the portable devices don't have bass boost. These are the only ones that have bass boost, and I ranked them from F to S. So in last place we have the Theo A1. If you turn the bass boost on that, which is also the EQ function, it's very heavily distorted, bloated, and muddy. It's just absolutely terrible. Then we have the Theo A5, and I would say it's not nearly as bad as the A1, but it's still pretty bad. And then the Theo Q5 does not really have a good bass boost either. Again, this is where it becomes a little bit acceptable. So even though it's still distorted, still bloated, muddy, it's at least usable enough, but it's still bad. And then we have the Theo Q1 Mark II, which is basically take the Theo Q5 and tone it down to where it doesn't distort or get overly bloated and muddy, but it is still pretty thick sounding. So the Theo Q1 Mark II goes into C tier. And then the Theo A3 is in B tier, and that's basically like a safe way to play bass boost. It doesn't do anything bad, meaning it's like very lean sounding bass boost. So it's like a nice benchmark. And then the topping NX4 is kind of like the Q1 or the Q5, where if you want like a thicker bass boost without it getting like bloated, muddy, or distorted, that's basically the NX4. And then the NX5, or not NX5, the NX1, it has a very similar sound quality or flavor as the NX4. It's a very similar flavor as the NX4, a very similar bass boost. It's just it's a little worse, but it's mostly almost the same, so I knocked it down one notch. And then the Thx Portable uses EQ. As long as you stay within 2 or 3 dB, it sounds fine, but if you go plus 6 dB at like 200 Hz and below, it starts to distort and get a little bit bloated, so it's not that good. So I'd actually put the Thx in C tier, but if you stay within 2 or 3 dB, then it's fine, and that's why it's in A tier. And then we have the topping NX5, which is like a better version of the Fiio A3. And then the Ifi XDSD and the Ifi xcan are by far the best bass boost here. There's like no distortion, like massive distortion. There's no massive like bloom into the lower mid-range. There's no boominess. There's no bloatedness. There's no muddiness, basically. So it's basically the best bass boost here is the Ifis, and that gets S tier. So let's go ahead and move on to the next tier list. Alright, so now we're going to finally get to sound quality. So this is where the laptop and the computer actually start to come into play. So if you have a crappy laptop audio out, or like a phone, that's going to be F tier. And if you use the EQ options on the Theo A1, the sound quality will actually be worse than a laptop because it can get really distorted. And that's why I really dislike the Theo A1. And then we have the topping NX1S. It doesn't do anything better than like a decent gaming computer motherboard. In my opinion, I think it's worse than a computer, but it could be better than a laptop. Because some laptops can have some really bad audio amplification. So the NX1S goes in between. And then the Fio A3 is like my benchmark for like what good sound is, or about equal to like a good gaming gaming motherboard audio. So I decided to put the Fio A3 next to the computer just for like a benchmark type of thing. But then let's go ahead and actually skip C, B, and A. Let's go to S. The Theo M11 Pro has basically the best sound quality here. The Thx Portable is about like 90% as good as the Theo M11 Pro. And then these ones aren't really much worse that are in A tier. So we have the Theo Q5. Then after that we have the Chord Mojo. And then after that we have the X Dsd. And then we also have the Ifi xcan. And then in B tier, we have the topping NX5, the topping NX4, and the Little Bear B4, and the Fio A5. And then in C tier, we have the topping NX2S, the Audioquest Dragonfly Black, the Ifi Nano, the Theo Q1 Mark II, and the Theo Q1. So let's start with C tier to do a little explaining here. First off, I would take a Q1 Mark II if you run it balanced over the K1. But I would take the Ifi Nano over the Q1 Mark II in terms of sound quality. And then I would take a topping NX2. Now I have not used this device. I only use it like once or twice every 2 to 3 months. I have to get around to actually reviewing it. But I do think the topping NX2 is better than the Q1 Mark II or the Nano. And the Audioquest is kind of like a similar. It took a DAC from an NX4 and then took the amp from the Ifi Nano and put it into one. That's kind of like what the Audioquest is. So I do think this is about, a little bit better than these three. The main thing is I would put this over this, this over that, and these two are kind of like equal. In fact, actually, yeah, that's pretty much equal. But you can see I put the A5 in B tier. The reason being is the A5 is definitely like the big brother to the K1, or definitely an upgrade to the Q1 Mark II, or any of these three. So that's why this is in B tier. Now the Little Bear B4 I haven't really used that much. It's actually been sitting in the box, but I kind of was like, where do I put this? Because I haven't really used this. Kind of like the NX2 or the Dragonfly. I haven't really used the Dragonfly much either. So I wasn't really sure where to put these three devices because I haven't really used them. So I just put the Little Bear B4 here. But then we have the NX5 and NX4. So slightly two different flavors of sound, but sound quality is almost equal. But I would say the NX5 is better than the NX4. And the NX4 and NX5 is an upgrade compared to the NX2. And then the NX1 is all the way down here. So you can see why these get in B tier, this gets C tier. And yes, the NX4 and NX5 is definitely better than the Ifi Nano, Q1 Mark II, and the K1. I really thought like a very good way to put these in an order, and I'm very happy with what I chose here. And then when we get to A tier, these are more expensive options, so the performance is better, but the price, not really. But remember, we're not doing price to performance, we're still doing sound quality. I want to point that out. We're still on sound quality. So in A tier, we put the Ifi, xdsd, and xcan, and then we have the Chord Mojo, the Q5, and the Thx. And I don't think I really need to explain those too much, but when I actually get around to reviewing these, which by the way, some of these I haven't reviewed yet, so I haven't really done direct comparisons. Like for example, the Thx Portable, I probably only compared it to the Theo M11 Pro like once. So I haven't really actually done any like major direct comparisons yet. So like, for example, I have like for the last 3 months, before I sold the Nano, I was comparing the Ifi to the Nano, so the xcan XDSD to the Nano, and I was also comparing those to the Theo M11 Pro. And the Theo M11 Pro was definitely better. And then for like the second month, I was spending time comparing these Ifis to the Chord Mojo, and I found that the Chord Mojo does some things better. And that's why that's above the Ifis. And then kind of took a break and got lazy. And I would say like this month and last month, I've been doing the Theo Q5. And I found that I've been comparing the Theo Q5 to the Chord Mojo, and I decided that it does certain things better as well. So that's why it's above the Chord Mojo. So that's basically sound quality. So let's go ahead and move on to the next tier list. So now we're going to do flavor. So sound quality is not always the deciding factor. Maybe flavor might be the deciding factor, that what you might actually like. And we're going to actually start at the top. We're going to start in S tier. And we're going to actually start with the Ifi first. The Ifi XDSD and Ifi XCan is what I would like to call true to the sound without being analytical, meaning it has a very enjoyable sound or flavor without being too analytical, meaning not too many micro details. Basically, you can sit back, listen to your music, and just enjoy your music. And I would consider that the Ifis tend to be rather flat and neutral sounding, with some slight warmth of colorization. But otherwise, the Ifis are pretty much the least analytical of all these amp DACs, in my opinion. They just have like a very enjoyable sound without getting like over analytical. Now the Chord Mojo is a little more analytical, but it's also less neutral, meaning it's more colored and it's quite a bit warmer. And that's why the Chord Mojo makes S tier in terms of flavor. And then like the Audioquest, I haven't really used it much, but I do find it kind of similar to like a topping DAC with a Ifi amplifier put together. That's kind of like what the Audioquest is. So I put that in A tier. Ifi Nano is kind of like a warmer, less sound quality though, but this list is not based off of sound quality, it's only based off of flavor. So I do want to point that out. So this is like a warmer, non-analytical Ifi X Dsd basically. So that's why it's A tier. Q1 Mark II is probably the second least analytical device here actually. It's pretty darn warm as well, but it also has quite a bit of a dark treble to it. And overall it just comes across like very enjoyable to listen to. And then we get into B tier. The topping NX4 is going to be like a warm analytical is what I call it. And then the NX1S is like a slightly warmer analytical than the NX4. And then we have the Theo Q5, which is like a slightly less warm NX4 analytical amp. And then the Little Bear, I haven't really used that in a while, so I'm not going to even make a comment on that. And then the NX5, which is in C tier, is a more neutral colorization, meaning it's not really warm, but it still has some colorization. I do want to point that out. So that goes there. And X2S is kind of like, it's actually a little warmer than the NX5, I will admit that. Fio A5 is like if you took some of the warmth out of the Q5, that's what you would get with the Theo A5, basically. And then we have the Theo K1, which isn't really all that warm either. And then Theo A3 is like my benchmark for neutral and flat. So flat meaning there's no emphasis in the bass, the mid-range, or the treble. Everything is linear and flat, meaning everything lines up flat. And then the colorization on the Theo A3 is fairly neutral, kind of like the Ifis actually. In fact, the A3 is probably, in the C tier, is probably the least analytical, because it's one of the more neutral sounding in the C tier. And then we move on to D tier, the Thx Portable and the Theo M11 Pro, which also has a Thx amplifier built in. Now the reason why I put these in the D tier is because they are kinda clinical, which means that they're very clean sounding and uncolored. Now personally, in my personal opinion, I would rank these in like the B tier. But some people do not like the Thx sound signature or colorization or flavor because that clinicalness sounds sterile to them, meaning I personally don't find it boring sounding or dull. Some people say the dynamics are bad. I don't agree with that. And some people say it's boring sounding. I don't agree with that either. It just has a very clinical sound, meaning it's very uncolored and clean sounding. And they're also very flat sounding as well, meaning, there's the tonal balance is flat, basically. But some people find them sterile, and that is why I put them in the D tier, because they might not like the flavor of those two amplifiers. And then the Fio A1, I just absolutely do not like that amplifier, so I just put that in the E tier. And then just ignore F tier, computer and laptop doesn't count, and that's basically flavor. So let's go ahead and move on to the next tier list. And this is actually going to be the last one. This is going to be priced to performance, but taking into account my recommendations. So we're going to start with the S tier. The topping NX5 I believe might actually be discontinued, but it went for about $70. And for under $100, that makes it a very good price to performance. Theo A5, it used to be about $130, but before they discontinued it, which I believe they did, it was also going for around $70, which makes it a very good price to performance. Now the topping NX4 does come with a DAC built in. Do you want to point that out? And a little more accessories to hook up to your phone, of course. Now it goes for $160 on Amazon, but if you get on like Massdrop or drop.com, then it's like $120 or $130, which overall still gives you extremely good price to performance compared to these other ones, and that's why it makes it into the S tier. And then when we move on to A tier, you can see that these are the three amplifiers I recommend around the $250 to $350 price tag. So the Q5 goes for about $350. Well, if you get the newer Q5S, it goes for like $350. The older Q5 you can probably get for like $200. And that's why I put it at the top. And then we have the Thx Portable, goes for $300, but if you get it on sale, it's like $250. Does not come with Bluetooth. The Q5 does come with Bluetooth. The Ifi xcan is $300, and that does also come with Bluetooth. So those are my 3 recommendations in the $300 price tag. And then $150 and under, my 3 recommendations is the NX5, the A5, and the NX4. Then when we get into B tier, these are the honorable mentions. And then when we get to C tier, those are like Like C tier and under are my not recommendations. I don't recommend them. Not really technically. I do kind of recommend the Theo K1 because it is cheap. But the Theo K1, for example, it goes for like 20 to 40 bucks. You can spend $30 more and get an NX5. You get a built-in battery, volume knob, bass boost. So there's not really too much. So technically the Theo K1 is actually not recommended. But let's go back to the B tier, which is my honorable mentions. So let's start with the Ifi XDSD. For $100 cheaper, you can just get the xcan. And if you're just going to use the Bluetooth anyways, then you don't need the built-in DAC in the XDSD because the xcan has a DAC for the Bluetooth. So you can just save $100 and get this. Plus the xcan has the advantage of having balanced, which gives you more power. And also has that extra bass boost or vocal presence switch. And then we have the Thx Portable. The Fio M11 Pro is about $600 to $650, and you can literally spend half the price and just get the Thx Portable to get about 90% of the performance. Or you can even get the newer Theo Q5S Type C, which comes with the Thx module, which sells for around $400. Or possibly cheaper. So that's why the Theo M11 Pro is only a B tier in terms of price to performance. And then we have the Chord Mojo, and I put this last in B tier because the Ifi XDSD is the same price, which is $400, but this comes with Bluetooth. And you also get a bass boost switch and a 3D switch. While the Chord Mojo is it doesn't give you any extra features or accessories. So I put the XDSD above the Chord Mojo because of those reasons. And the reason why I put the Theo M11 Pro above the XDSD and the Chord Mojo is, let's say if you were to get the Theo M11 Pro on sale for around $400, then you're definitely better off getting the M11 Pro over these two. Or let's say if you're already spending $400, which is way too much money in my opinion in terms of price to performance, you might as well just spend $200 more and just get an M11 Pro and call it a day. Or get an Ifi Micro. I would be really excited to try that, because I bet you the Ifi Micro is probably the only device here that gets an S tier in pretty much everything, other than maybe battery power. Probably S tier price, or maybe not price, or not price to performance. But Ifi Micro would not get S tier in price to performance or battery, but pretty much sound quality, flavor, accessories, definitely power, build quality. What else did we do? Basically S tier in mostly everything. I would be really excited to try the Ifi Micro. Yes, maybe the price to performance isn't the greatest, but you are getting probably a pretty good device because they have the new Ifi Micro signature. And then the Little Bear B4 is about $100, and I would actually recommend it over the Audioquest because it's the only one here that's a tube portable amplifier. It's only an amp, no DAC. And the Q1 Mark II goes for $100, and then the Ifi Nano goes for $200. And the Nano sits in a very weird price bracket because at $200, you're better off just spending $100 more and getting the Ifi xcan. You get bass boost, you get a 3D switch, you get Bluetooth, you get better sound quality. So for $100 more, even though the build quality, I hate it. I absolutely hate the build quality. For $100 more, just get the Ifi xcan over the Nano. That's why the Nano is only in C tier. And then the XDSD, I put that in between. That's $100 more than this or $200 more than that. So it's not as good as a deal. So the best deal out of these 3 Ifis is the xcan. That's why it's A tier. But back to the before, it's $100. I'd recommend it over this. This is $100. This is $200. So this is like half the price. So this is a better deal. This is also $100, but you get no features. So no bass boost, no battery, nothing. And that's actually another reason why I did put the Theo K1 in C tier in terms of price to performance, because it gives you no features. Sound quality is pretty good for the money. You get it for like $20, $40. It's pretty good. But you spend like $30 more, you can just get an NX5 or a Fio A5 or an NX4. So that is why the Theo K1 is going to be in the C tier. And then we have the topping NX2S, and that's like a cheaper Q1 Mark II. So that's why it makes it into the B tier. So these are my two cheap options that kind of get into B tier, and then these are my three expensive options that make it into B tier. So these are my honorable mentions. And then C tier, we kind of just explained C tier. So let's go ahead and move on to D tier. Again, the Fio A3, it's also discontinued, I believe. Not sure. But what is that thing going for? Like $70 something? You can just get an NX2S, in my opinion. Or you can get a little bare beef or you can spend less money, get a K1, or you can spend a little bit more money and get a Dragonfly, or better yet, just go for NX5, A5, or NX4. And then the NX1, yeah, the performance on that isn't very good, so I don't really care that that thing's like $40. And the A1 is basically the same deal, even though that thing's going for like what, $20 or something like that. The performance on it is just not good. So that's basically everything that I wanted to show you today. So that is basically my recommendations. So I would highly recommend the NX5, NX4, or NX4 for under $150. If you're going to be spending around $300, then we have the Q5, or the newer Q5S, in particular with Type-C, Thx Portable, or the Ifi xcan, and then these are my honorable mentions in the B tier. And that should hopefully be helpful for you guys. I don't know how long this video was. It's probably like 30 minutes long, so I'm sorry that this took a while. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for watching.